بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآل الطيبين الطاهرين وسيما بقية الله في العالمين. اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم. اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علمك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we start our second semester on the book Babul Hadi Ashar. Alhamdulillah, we already covered the discussions about the existence of God, then we talked about the affirmative qualities of God, then we started negational qualities and we discussed some of them. We are to start from وَلَا يَصِحُّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّذَّةُ وَالْأَلَمُ. According to this version that we have is page 47. وَلَا يَصِحُّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّذَّةُ وَالْأَلَمُ. Two of the things that would not be applicable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to theologians, are pleasure and pain. Ladha, pleasure, alam, pain. لامتناع المزاج عليه تعالى. Because it's impossible for Allah to have mizaj. Mizaj means disposition, but here means, pardon? It's like a kind of physical condition that makes you healthy or ill, makes you, for example, suffer or enjoy. There is no mizaj, there is no disposition for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the only thing that we have in the main text. But then there is commentary. And the commentary is actually differentiating between al-ladha wal-alam al-hissiyan and al-ladha wal-alam aqliyan. So there's a difference. So the idea is this. Since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a physical object, is not a bodily or corporeal being, so any condition, any quality, anything that happened to the physical objects or to bodily objects would not apply to him. When you, for example, are injured, you have pain. Or, if someone, for example, hits you, you have pain. When you eat something delicious, you have pleasure. Or when you go, for example, to a beautiful place, look at flowers, garden, you enjoy. This pleasure is something that is because you are affected by what is around, or you are affected by what you eat or drink, or by injury if it is pain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not affected by anything, is not influenced by anything. Therefore they say there is no pleasure or pain for him. But some people have said, especially philosophers, have said that yes, it is true that he doesn't have bodily or physical or corporeal ladha or alam. Al-ladhatul hissiya, no. Al-alamul hissi, no. There is no, physical alam or pleasure that he senses. No. But some have said that there is a possibility of thinking of intellectual pleasure for Allah. Or you can say abstract pleasure. Because what is ladha? Idrakul mula'im bima huwa mula'im. To understand what is pleasant insofar as it is pleasant. Alam is idrakul munafir, something which is unpleasant insofar as it's unpleasant. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands something which is the greatest mula'im, and that is himself. He has the greatest ladha because he has the greatest idrak of the greatest mudrak. So he's the greatest mudrak and the greatest mudrak. He has the best understanding of the most pleasant, most perfect thing. So, in this sense, he has ladha. But in order to avoid confusions in some texts, like Isharat, Ibn Sina uses bahja. So bahja is a kind of intellectual, a kind of pure pleasure. I mean, it's pure from anything physical, anything dependent on senses and on body. It's just a matter of understanding. So, in this sense, it's true to talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having ladha or bahja or pleasure. But this pleasure is not related to eating, drinking, seeing something which is pleasant, being in a good place. No. This is just a matter of understanding, since he is the best person who understands and the best thing to be understood. So his understanding of himself is the best of the best. So he has the greatest ladha. Okay? And maybe you can relate to this ayah as a possibility. لو أردنا أن نتخذ لهوا لاتخذناه من لدنا إن كنا فاعلين. If we were interested in having some kind of amusement, we didn't need to create you so that we entertain ourselves. We could have done this with ourselves. It means that if Allah was interested in having pleasure, he could have just think of himself and understand himself, and that's enough for him. Those who don't have a deep sense of internal beauty, they look for external beauty. Those who are not comfortable with themselves, they look for a comfortable place or comfortable gathering. Yeah? And this is why most of people escape from themselves. You say, no, people don't escape from it. Yes, they escape from themselves. Otherwise, if you tell them, please remain in one room, just yourself for 24 hours, they get mad. They say, at least let me switch on TV, at least, let me use mobile, let me be on internet. Say, no, just yourself, just enjoy yourself. Say, no, I cannot enjoy being alone. There is nothing enjoyable in me. Yeah, they don't say this, but it's the reality. But if you have a thinker, he's just looking for an opportunity to be alone. If you have an abid, arif, they want to be alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need to gain pleasure from outside, because he has the greatest perfection inside. But this is not physical or sensual pleasure. This is not hissi. This is aqli. But some people, some mutakallimin who have no philosophical, inclination, they say no. We don't use lazza for Allah because asma'ullah tawqifiyatun. We use only those names and qualities which have occurred in the Quran and Hadith, and therefore we don't use this lazza for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you look at the commentary, وَلَا يَصِحُّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّذَّةُ وَالْأَلَمُ أَقُولُ. So Fazil Miqdad is explaining, الْأَلَمُ وَاللَّذَّةُ أَمْرَانِ وُجْدَانِيَّانِ. These are two things that you understand by yourself. In Mantiq, maybe you have discussed this in the discussion about different types of arguments. So we have badihiyat, and one of the badihiyat, one of the things which are self-evident, are vajdaniyat, something that you understand by a kind of knowledge by presence. You have ilm huzuri. Anyway, these are two things that you can understand. Everyone understands alam and lazza, and also everyone is able to somehow define it for himself but cannot articulate it. It's very difficult to articulate. Al-alamu wal-ladha amran wujdaniyan fala yaftaqiran ila ta'rif. They don't need definition because you understand by yourself. وَقَدْ يُقَالُ فِيهِمَا. It has been said about them. So there is such definition also. Al-ladhatu idrakul mula'im min haythu huwa mula'im. To understand what is pleasant. So what is pleasant? Mula'im means something that matches you, something that fits into your expectations. It's pleasant. Mula'im. Opposite to munafir. Sometimes there's a person whose character is pleasant. Sometimes there's a person whose character is unpleasant. Mula'im, munafir. Is it clear? So, ladha is a matter of understanding. If there is no understanding, even if you have the most delicious food, you don't enjoy. Imagine if someone is, for example, ill, someone who has cold or flu, sometimes they don't understand taste. Yeah? So, just to have mula'im is not enough. You have to understand mula'im. Or if someone is very busy, his mind is very busy, and he's eating but he's not enjoying. Okay? Or if someone is very busy, he has problems in life but he doesn't suffer because he's very busy. Yeah? So, it's a matter of understanding, but also understanding it in the way that it is pleasant or unpleasant. Because sometimes something is unpleasant, but you think it's pleasant, then you enjoy. Or something is pleasant, you think it's unpleasant, you suffer. Imagine you have, for example, a very good friend, but you think he's a bad person. Or a good husband or good wife, you think is a bad person. You suffer. Because although this person is mula'im, but you don't understand it bima huwa mula'im. You understand it to be munafir. People enjoy smoking. It's munafir, but they think it's mula'im. So, to be really mula'im or munafir is not the point. The point is how you think of something. You can enjoy something which is bad, and you may not enjoy something which is good. Yeah? Those who are in control of their emotions, they may reach the point that as soon as they know something is good, they like it. When they know something is bad, they don't like it. We are maybe not in that level. For example, imagine you know that for you, for example, drinking a cup of milk is very useful. Then you should enjoy it. Not just drink it, you should enjoy it also. If you are aqil, so something which is good for you, you should have pleasure. And drinking a cup of, some drinks which are harmful, then you should have pain. But unfortunately, sometimes we go just after emotion. Although we know that this drink is harmful, we drink. I'm talking about halal, not haram. Yeah, some of the drinks I don't want to mention names and brands, but just because of taste, we enjoy. But someone who is aqil, if knows that something is not healthy, would not enjoy. How can you enjoy something which is not healthy? So, let's go to the commentary. The commentary, Al-alamu wal-ladhatu amran wujdaniyan fala yaftaqiran ila ta'rif. These are two things that you feel, you have internal understanding, you have kind of self-evident understanding. They don't need definition, but still, for the sake of teaching, for the sake of ta'aleem, for the sake of clarification, these definitions are offered. Al-ladhatu idrakul mula'im min haythu huwa mula'im. To understand what is pleasant in so far as it's present. So you understand it to be pleasant. Wal alamu idrakul munafi min haythu huwa munafin. Munafiyun, because it's naqis, becomes munafin. Yeah, like ramen. Ramyun becomes ramen. So pain is to understand something which is unpleasant insofar as it is unpleasant. Homa, both pleasure and pain. قد يكونان حسيين. Sometimes they are hissi. It means that they are understood by senses, they are bodily, they relate to physical, fabric of the person understands. وقد يكونان عقليين. But sometimes they are intellectual, they are abstract. فإن الإدراك إن كان حسيا. If your understanding is through senses, taste, smelling, watching, hearing, so the lazza and alam are also hissi. If the understanding is aqli, is not through five senses, it's through reason, then the lazza and alam are aqli. إذا تقرر هذا. If this is established, have you understood this so far? Okay. فنقول. So we say, أما الألم, pain, فهو مستحيل عليه. It's impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have pain. إجماعا. There is consensus, no disagreement. من العقلاء. So, it's not something only about mutakallimin. All uqala agree on this. Why? Because there is nothing that can be munafi for Allah, something that can be unpleasant, something that can bring pain or injury or harm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something that can make Allah suffer. There is no such a thing. Amma ladha. When it comes to pleasure, if it is hissi, again, there is ijma. But if there is aqli, we said some people, like some philosophers, they said lazzat aqli is possible for Allah. Okay? Bahja. Amma ladha فَإِنْ كَانَتْ حِسِّيَّةً, if you mean pleasure which is through senses, is bodily, physical, فَكَذَلِكَ, means this is also impossible, and all agree. Why? Because لأن اللذة الحسية من طوابع المزاج. Because this is one of the outcomes of having disposition, having body which go through different moods, different conditions. وَالْمِزَاجُ يَسْتَحِيلُ عَلَيْهِ تَعَالَى. Allah doesn't have such situation. وَإِلَّا لَكَانَ جِسْمًا. Otherwise he would have been a physical object. وَإِنْ كَانَتْ عَقْلِيَّةً, means if كَانَتْ اللَّذَّةُ عَقْلِيَّةً. If you mean by lazza, intellectual lazza, فَقَدْ أَثْبَتَهَا الْحُكَمَاءُ لَهُ تَعَالَى. Philosophers, حُكَمَا here means philosophers. Philosophers have confirmed this type of lazza for Allah. Intellectual lazza. They said intellectual lazza is applicable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَصَاحِبُ الْيَاقُوتِ مِنَّا. And also the author of the book Yaqut, I think it's Nobakhti, also has the same idea. Nobakhti is not Hakim, he's a mutakallim, he's not philosopher, he's a mutakallim, he's a Shia mutakallim, and Allama Hilli has also a commentary on Yaqut. He also has the same idea.
What's the meaning of Yaqut?
Yaqut is a type of jewelry, but this is the name of the book, Al-Yaqut. So philosophers and Sahibul Yaqut Minnam is the author of this book from us, means from our mazhab. They have this idea that Allah has intellectual lazza. لأن الباري تعالى متصف بكماله اللائق به. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the vasf, has the quality of perfection which suits him. Because we have two types of perfection. Some types of perfection is la'iqu bil mumkinat. Some types of perfection are good for contingent beings. The knowledge that we have, the power that we have, the life that we have, the will that we have, they are perfect. I mean, a matter of perfection. They are kamal, it's a good, positive, but they are not suitable for Allah. Because they are limited, they are finite. But anything which is a matter of perfection and is unlimited, is absolute, is suitable for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, ladha, according to these people, is a matter of perfection. And it's something that should be there for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But not in the way that we have lazza. In the way that He has lazza. Which is the greatest understanding of the greatest mula'im. That is something that's suitable for Allah. So, لأن الباري تعالى متصف بكماله. Allah has the perfection of Himself which suits Him. And it's impossible to have naqs, deficiency, imperfection. This is impossible for Allah to have imperfection. If you say Allah doesn't have this understanding of Himself, this is a matter of lacking perfection. It's naqs, it's deficiency. وَمَعَ ذَلِكَ فَهُوَ مُدْرِكٌ لِذَاتِهِ وَكَمَالِهِ. So Allah has kamal, and He understands His kamal, and this is lazza. He has perfection which is suitable for Him, absolute perfection, and He understands His absolute perfection. So he has lazza. فَيَكُونُ أَجَلَّ مُدْرَكٍ لأعظم مدرك بأتم إدراك. He is the best of those who understand, for the best thing to be understood in the best way of understanding. Okay?
So,
The best one to understand, the best thing to be understood in the best way of understanding. So this is the greatest lazza.
so he enjoys that.
Yeah.
So he
But
has-
enjoys not in a physical sense that say, okay, now for example his blood circulation goes higher, no. Enjoys means understands.
understands his own kamal. and
Because
that's
even in us, lazza is a matter of understanding, but it comes with some changes in our body. Otherwise, as I said, if you are busy with something and you don't understand, you don't have lazza. Lazza is a matter of understanding, yes.
If we use that argument to say that Allah doesn't gain anything from this pleasure, then can we not use the same argument for pain? To say that if Allah is not suffering because it's not a physical world, then surely we can say that Allah comprehends the greatest pain or the greatest displeasure.
There is nothing to make him suffer because there is nothing at a level that can challenge him, that can trouble him. Yes, as a sifat fi'l, for example, you can say Allah is not pleased with this. Allah is, for example, angry with this. But this is only at the sifat fi'l. There is nothing that can be challenging a sense of God. Because what is there other than Allah and His creation? Therefore, they don't use alam, but they use latha. Yeah. Someone had? Yes.
Question. Is the level of your sensuous and mental pleasure, pain, whatever, is that in proportion to your taqwa or your nearness to God? Because clearly it's a level of depth of knowing something. So what is pain to someone is pleasure to one who is near God.
Maybe.
So what I'm
It
saying
depends.
is that it's kind of a depth, it's a layer,
Yeah.
surface, isn't it? So
There are many factors. There are many factors. For example, if the room is very hot, okay, if the room is very hot, even someone who's near to God may suffer. It's not that they don't suffer heat of the room. Okay? Pardon? Oh, it's okay. But if, for example,
the mind
pardon?
over matter sometimes, isn't it? It's a state of the mind over the matter.
Yeah.
So
So there are few factors.
Yeah.
Because in the end of the day, we have some worldly presence and engagement. But for example, a friend of God, a wali of Allah, no matter how much is put into troubles in dunya, would never, commit suicide, for example. Would never say, my life is useless. Okay? So, they may suffer, but they have also many other important things to enjoy. That overall balance is in the favor of pleasure.
That comes with the understanding the names to God. And
Yes,
So when you live in a
understanding.
world which is very sensual, which is very material,
Yes.
you in a way are this barrier really, in terms of your growth.
Yes. So, also, there are also some effects of body on the soul. For example, if you are an Arif and young, if you are an Arif and old, still your body can have some impact. For example, if someone is old and is reciting dua, okay, he's enjoying, but then his knees or her knees, start, aching, Unless he's so, for example, attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that would not feel anything, then after that, you have to take him to hospital because he didn't feel any pain, but now he's not able to move. So, there are many factors. You cannot say definitely there is no pain but if everything is being equal, those who have developed greater understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their role in this world, and they are more intellectual, so they would have less pain for worldly things and they would have great joy for spiritual things. But it's not possible to measure it because there are so many different factors. Even, some people, for example, if maybe, for example, I come to this room and I say salam, and for example, to someone and he doesn't reply or doesn't show respect to me, maybe some people for 1 week, they are upset. Yeah, but people who are rich inside, they will not be that much upset. It's not important, so there are many factors that can. But also there are people who are not sensitive. They don't even understand what is respect. So they are not upset because they don't understand what is respect. This is also not good. So you cannot say whoever is not upset for anything is Arif. There are people who are never upset because they are not sensitive. So, yes.
How this lazat akliya is different to kafiya, and when we say the ghazab or the happiness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala,
those are sifat fi'l. So as a sifat fi'l, it's not a problem because they are understood from a relation between Allah and something. So Allah is not changing, but the other side of relation. As you remember, we said this in Aqaid, in Du'a Arafah. إلهي تقدس رضاك أن تكون له علة منك فكيف يكون له علة مني. Your pleasure is greater than being caused by you. So how can I cause your pleasure? Even Allah cannot please himself. Not because he's not able, because no one can influence him. Even he does not influence himself. Okay? Because if he influences himself, it means that he is giving to himself something he didn't have. It's impossible. So, no one can bring any change to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah has will. If you are complying with his will, we say you are pleasing him. If you are not complying with his will, you say you are displeasing him. Allah is angry with you.
I think those are just words, terminology, meaning to utilize in order to get an understanding.
But it's not just words, it's a matter of concept, meaning. Big difference. So, we must not think that we are making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy emotionally or unhappy emotionally. But at the same time, we should not think that whatever we do is not important. Yes? Whatever we do is significant, not because we are affecting him, but because we are affecting our relation with him. Okay? So this is very important. The most important thing for us is our relation with Allah, not Allah as such. Don't misunderstand me. Because Allah as such is perfect and is always there. What is important is you make good relation. Yeah? Sun is there, shining. What should be your concern? Existence of sun? No, sun is there. Your concern should be your relation with sun. Yeah? Whether you like it or not, Allah is there. It's wajibul wujud. Your concern should be relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
What I meant by pleasure and pain, pleasure and wrath of Allah is it's relational. So I felt like those two are just words in order to help us understand. So if you're coming near to Allah, clearly that nearness is pleasure because Allah is absolute perfection. Coming away is wrath or displeasure, just in terms of the relational relations. Do you see? Then it's not
Nearness
necessarily
is not
wrong.
enough. There are people also, this is also interesting, you ask a good question. There are people who might be near to Allah, but still they suffer because they feel they are far from Allah. Because a mu'min, as long as he's in dunya, is always worried, and no one knows how near he is to God. Yes? So mu'min actually always underestimate his performance. You cannot find any moment who says, I am muqarrab, I am near. Yes? They cry over their tragedies, over their guilt, over problems. So they suffer because they think they are far from Allah. But in reality they are near. But as we said, suffering is not a matter of munafir as such. It's munafir bima huwa munafir. So if you think you are far, for example, let me make it more simple. If you think your mother doesn't love you, you suffer even if she loves you. If you think your mother doesn't love you, even if she loves you, you suffer. So, mu'min, because always is worried about his sins, problems, shortcomings, and says, I'm not near Allah, would have some kind of suffering. Although maybe this is unnecessary. If you remember, we had discussion about la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. Sometimes Allah says there is no need to grieve, but He is still grieving.
Can we have nafs mutmainna in this world?
We can have nafs mutmainna, but nafs mutmainna is still on the surface. It's like an ocean, but on the surface there can be waves. So even nafs mutmainna can cry over his sins, Yes.
But Sheikh, isn't this feeling of returning to Allah and seeking forgiveness and crying over your situation, which we witness even in our imams, isn't this sort of a primary foundational requirement of a believer, to remain between khawf and raja?
Yes. Because as long as you are in dunya and you are not able to see your position, you have to be worried. No one can say, I have, alhamdulillah, finished everything. You have to be worried. But at the same time, this is a sign of at least a healthy approach. So if you are crying over sins, I'm not saying you are muqarrab, but at least you are healthy. Because the one who is ill and doesn't feel pain, there is something wrong. If you have pain, it means that at least your senses are working. So it's a sign of health. But maybe, inshallah, you would realize that actually you didn't need to worry that much because you are already forgiven, for example.
But Sheikh, even if supposedly somehow you were to see your position, and for example, you are at the stage of la khawfun alayhim, for example, there's still the worry of what may happen tomorrow. So maybe today I am at this stage, but tomorrow I don't know what will happen. So the fear, I think, will never go away completely.
No, because if you know that la khawfun alayhim, then khawf is for future. So it means that you don't need to worry about future. Your future is also guaranteed. إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا تتنزل عليهم الملائكة ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا. So don't have grief for past, don't have fear for future. But the thing is that they don't hear the angels' conversation. So they keep still having the khawf and huzn.
But do you think that this is unnecessary, this fear and hope, for that wali, for example?
No, I think it's good because unless you know. If you don't know, then this is good because who told you that you are awliyaullah? You have to be worried. Yeah, so we have to be worried. It's like sometimes I use this example. I say, if, for example, you take people for the first time to Hajj, they are very worried. You know, they are worried even to touch, anything. Say maybe there is a kafar or something. Very worried. So you tell them, don't worry. Millions of people have done Hajj. Inshallah, you are going to do your Hajj. Don't worry. But still, it's good that they worry to some extent. Because if they don't worry at all, then they take risks. They don't listen to alim. They make their Hajj, corrupt or void. So you tell them not to worry, but still, it's good that they worry to some extent. So you want to make a balance here. So that they worry just enough to listen and act carefully. But not to worry too much that then they have panic and they don't know what to do.
So, Sheikh, when you mentioned unnecessary fear and worry, you were talking about excessive.
Yes.
Otherwise, remaining between fear and hope is where exactly.
So a type of fear that is positive is giving you more energy to work. Like, a speaker, if you are invited to give a lecture, if you worry too much, you forget everything. Even if you spend tens of hours and prepare lecture, you forget. But if you don't worry and say, I have experience, I have knowledge, and you don't make any preparation, again, this is also bad. So you have to have some worry, but very measured. So this is about the idea of the people who say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has intellectual ladha. Hukama, philosophers, and Sahibul Yaqut from Shia Mutakallimin. وَأَمَّا الْمُتَكَلِّمُونَ other متكلمين except from this صاحب اليهود فَقَدْ أَطْلَقُوا الْقَوْلَ بِنَفْيِ اللَّذَّةِ they said Allah has no ladha in an absolute sense, means whether it be hissi or aqli. أطلقوا mutlaq means whether it's hissi or aqli doesn't matter. They say there is no way to use the concept of ladha, pleasure, for Allah. Why? إما either because لِاعْتِقَادِهِمْ نَفْيَ اللَّذَّاتِ الْعَقْلِيَةِ they don't believe at all in intellectual pleasures. They say we don't have such a thing as intellectual pleasure. Or لعدم ورود ذلك في الشرع الشريف or they say such concept has not come in religion, in the religious text, in the scriptures. We don't have this. فإن صفاته تعالى وأسماءه توقيفية because they believe that we can only use those names and attributes for God that they are taken from scripture. Tawqifi means you have to stop. Anything which has not come in Quran or Hadith, you should not use it. You should stop with what is in the scripture. So for example, according to them, you cannot say Allah is wajibul wujud because maybe there is no Hadith which says Allah is wajibul wujud. Definitely Quran doesn't use this term, or محرك أول, for example, is the first mover. لا يجوز لغيره التحجم بها إلا بإذن من. No one can use any name, any attribute for God apart from what Allah has permitted, has given permission. لأنه وإن كان ذلك جائزا في نظر العقل, because even if according to your intellect you think and you find no problem, you say this concept is good, this concept is something that matches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لكنه ليس من الأدب. This is not polite, this is not a matter of etiquette. لجواز أن يكون غير جائز من جهة لا نعلمها, because maybe there is something wrong that you don't know. Maybe this is something which is not permissible because of something that your knowledge is not enough to understand. So at least politeness and etiquette require that you use what you are 100% sure. And that is only what is mentioned in the Quran and Hadith. This is their argument. Of course, philosophers don't accept this. They say we can use concepts which are, after careful consideration, free from deficiency, from imperfection, we can use for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next thing that would not apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-ittihad. Al-ittihad. What is ittihad?
Association.
Like combination. You know, we say Allah is wahid, is one, is good. But Allah being united with something so that He is combined, and then we have a third thing out of this combination, this is not acceptable.
How is this different from composition, murakkab?
Murakkab means to have parts. So he's not murakkab, he doesn't have parts, he's simple, but sometimes something simple can be mixed with another thing. Is it clear? So, to say he is not murakkab means he doesn't have parts. But to say he is not ittihad means, doesn't do ittihad means he doesn't get mixed with other things. Because maybe two simple things can get mixed.
It's like saying that to make one apple, for example, you need the seeds, you need the skin, everything. But the apple can be part of juice, for example. And the juice is ittihad.
No, apple is not part of juice. Juice is part of apple.
Juice, yeah.
But for example, you know, you have water and you have, for example, flour. You mix them, then you have paste. So this is the result of two things mixing and being combined. وَلَا يَتَّحِدُ بِغَيْرِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not get united with something other than Him. It means mixed. Because it's very simple to understand. Because there is nothing at the level of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know? How can, for example, someone that you imagine in your mind or something that you imagine in your mind mix with you? It's lower than you. Okay? Can you use the water which is in your mind to quench your thirst? No. Can you use the perfume which is your mind? No. Can you swim in this ocean which is your mind? No.
In your mind you can swim.
Pardon?
In your mind you can swim.
Even in your mind you cannot swim. an image of you may swim, but you cannot swim. So, nothing can be thought to be at that level that can be part of God or a combination of God and something else. Because we don't have anything else at the level of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ولا يتحد بغيره لامتناع الاتحاد مطلقا. He would not be mixed with anything other than him, because if you think carefully, ittihad is not possible at all. Then the commentator says, al-ittihad يقال على معنيين مجازي وحقيقي. There are two types of ittihad, or two types of unity, but unity not in the sense of oneness, means combination. Yes. One is majazi, means metaphoric. One is real. أما المجازي, اتحاد majazi, metaphoric combination, is سيرورة الشيء شيئا آخر. Something becomes something else. Sometimes this is بالكون والفساد. Sometimes it's by adding. I don't know, you remember, maybe we discussed this, but you study this more in philosophy, inshallah. There are two types of changes. Sometimes change is gradual. In philosophy, they call it haraka, motion. Sometimes change is sudden. They call it kawn and fasad, generation and corruption. It means that something changes to another thing all of a sudden. There is no gradual process. So, al-ittihad al-majazi, the metaphoric combination, is sometimes by kawn and fasad, and sometimes is by adding something. For example, water becomes gas. Gas becomes liquid. So it's a change, but without adding anything to it. But sometimes you add, like you add water to soil, you make clay. So this is a change, but by adding something. But in reality, there is no combination here. It's not that gas or steam and water, liquid water, are mixed with each other. Things are separate. The real ittihad is two things get mixed and we produce a third thing. سيرورة الشيئين الموجودين شيئا واحدا موجودا. Two beings become one being. He says neither majazi nor haqiqi apply to God. إذا تقرر هذا, if you realize two types of ittihad, فَعْلَمْ, please be informed that أَنَّ الْأَوَّلَ مُسْتَحِيلٌ عَلَيْهِ تَعَالَى قَطْعًا. The first would not apply to Allah, because Allah would not become another thing by kawn fasad. There is no kawn fasad, there is no change in him. You cannot add anything to him. You cannot, say that soil became clay by adding water. In this sense, Allah is not going to change what you are going to add to him. There is nothing to add to him. Okay? But two things being mixed, and then we have another thing. He says, أن الأول مستحيل عليه تعالى قطعا لاستحالة الكون والفساد عليه. The first is impossible because كون and fasad, generation and corruption would not apply to him. أما الثاني, the second type, a kind of combination, this is not acceptable. Yes, some have said this. قال بعض النصارى. Some Christians have said that Allah is mixed with Masih, with Jesus. He tries to be here allowing different interpretations. So he says, بعض النصارى. Some of the Christians said, قالوا اتحدت لاهوتية الباري مع ناسوتية عيسى. They say there is a kind of divine aspect and a kind of physical aspect. Divine aspect of God and physical aspect of Jesus are combined. So, because there were people who were monophysites, they said Jesus has only one nature. Some were saying that has two sides, two natures. So they had this idea that now there is a combination. وقالت النصيرية. Nusayriya are a group of ghulat, zealots. They had the idea, or it is attributed to them, something like Jesus, but for Imam Ali alayhi salam. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ittahada bi-Ali. He is combined with Ali. He has been mixed with Ali. وقال المتصوفة, some of the people who are not really master of Sufism, whatever, but they have some idea. قالوا إنه اتحد بالعارفين. Allah is mixed with all the urafa. So he says, we don't need to judge about this. If they mean by ittihad what we said, it's not possible. That something is mixed with Allah. It's not possible. If they mean something else, so we have to first understand what they say, so they should explain to us what they say. We don't want to judge. They have to tell us what we understand from the term ittihad is not acceptable. If they mean something else, then they should clarify. فَإِنْ عَنَوْا غَيْرَ مَا ذَكَرْنَا. If they mean something other than what we said, فَلَا بُدَّ مِنْ تَصَوُّرِهِ أَوَّلًا. We should first conceive it, ثُمَّ يُحْكَمُ عَلَيْهِ. Then it can be judged. So this is the adab of a scholar. A scholar doesn't judge and then try to understand what is the case. First try to understand. So you try to understand what is the position of that person, then you judge. وَإِنْ عَنَوْا مَا ذَكَرْنَا. If they mean what we said, فَهُوَ بَاطِلٌ قَطْعًا. So it's definitely false. If they mean something else, we don't say anything. We ask them, please explain what you mean, then we judge. Why, if they mean what we said, it's batil? لأن الاتحاد مستحيل في نفسه فيستحيل إثباته لغيره. Because, first of all, ittihad, combination, two things becoming another thing is impossible, and therefore you cannot ascribe it or attribute it to something else. This is impossible. How you attribute something impossible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? As I said, of course, with respect to Allah, even we don't need to go into this discussion because there is nothing else to be mixed with Him. But we say there is a general problem. Even with other things, ittihad doesn't make sense. Let's finish these two lines, then answer your question. أما استحالته, impossibility, اتحاد, impossible اتحاد, فهو أن المتحدين بعد اتحادهما, when these two things are united and combined, after combination, إن بقيا موجودين, are they still there? If these two are still there, A and B are mixed. If after mixing them, still A and B exist, فلا اتحاد, so there is no big change, nothing has happened. لأنهما اثنان, so if these two still exist, so there is no unity formed out of these two. Still these two are there, so just they are next to each other. This is just jawar, this is just neighborhood, not really unity. وَإِنْ عُدِمَا مَعًا, if you say no, they don't exist, again there is no ittihad, because it means that they have finished, they have been finished. So when you say na'udhu billah, Allah is mixed with someone, do you mean that Allah is there, that the person is also there, so then there is no ittihad? If you mean Allah is no longer there, then it doesn't make sense. وَإِنْ عُدِمَا مَعًا فَلَا اتِّحَادَ إِذَنْ بَلْ وُجِدَ ثَالِثٌ, something, a third thing has been created. You say one of them remains and the other one doesn't remain, again there is no ittihad. وَإِنْ عُدِمَ أَحَدُهُمَا وَبَقِيَ الْآخَرِ فَلَا اتِّحَادَ أَيْضًا, this is not also not unity. لأن المعدوم لا يتحد بالموجود, something which doesn't exist cannot be mixed with something which exists. This is general problem, but as I said, with respect to Allah, there is more problem, because there is nothing at the level of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to think that can be mixed with Him or can even come next to Him. Even nothing can be next to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let alone being mixed with Allah. Okay? Maybe we stop here for the first session, it's enough. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.